All right, everybody, welcome to Chapter 5 in our Grimoire Studies course. This week, we're going to talk about banishing spell work and what that entails, and maybe clarify a few of the things that I think folks might get a little bit confused on or might conflate a little bit that could have a lot to do with the kind of results that you're getting. So as we did in our previous module, and we're going to continue to do going forward, we're going to make these interactive as we go. And so while we've only got two folks here live today, those of you that are watching on the replay, please feel free to participate as well. You can answer every one of these questions, simply in the comment section when we get it posted. I will also say that it'll probably take me a little longer to get these posted because I'm using a little different software and I'm on a learning curve. So let's start out by, Ellen and Allison, if either one of you want to share, and don't feel like I'm putting anybody on the spot. So if you don't have anything to add, just say, I'm going to pass on that one. But what stood out for you as you read the chapter on banishing spells?
I liked the part in the end where it said, what if the banishment itself is the moment we realize, such as we take back our power and recognize that this is the experience in life entirely within our control, and that the cosmos is simply responding to our programming. That was the best thing out of the whole chapter.
Worth the price of admission. Thank you.
You're welcome. That was a very powerful statement. It really, really is. I just like the whole concept of that statement. It's what we need to realize, really. And some of us, and like you say, like everybody's too caught up in getting all the little things that are really not necessary. But until you realize that you are the magic, it doesn't matter what you buy. You have to really realize that it's you, and that if you can't do it, then that's it.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
We're going to talk about some of those concepts in a couple slides. That's why I'm not saying too much yet.
Okay.
Ellen, did anything stand out for you in this chapter?
I had some questions near the end of the chapter about expectations.
Okay, we'll hold off on that for a second.
Okay.
All right, because we're going to get to that. So there's a quote that I have in one of my journals from a book called Protection Spells, written by an author named Aaron Murphy Hiscock. And in the book, they say, when casting a spell, you function as an agent of change. You actively call upon resources to gather and direct energy. Initializing change is your intention, and whatever consequences follow are also your responsibility. And I absolutely loved this quote and was looking for it the whole time I was writing the damn book, and I couldn't find the journal it was in, and I stumbled on it this week when I was clearing stuff off a bookshelf to clean it, and I was like, oh, it wasn't written in the book, it was on a piece of paper stuck in a book, and that's a different book. The one that I use, it's almost like a scrapbook. I have a million pieces of paper stuck in. So I wanted this in there for a reason, because I just love the way that they articulate this, that casting a spell, you're functioning as an agent of change. Like, I can't think of a better way to encapsulate what we do as practitioners. That's why I say that we're always working with the energy around people and places and things and circumstances. A simpler way to say that is we're agents of change. And so our intention is initializing the change, and whatever the consequences, whatever the outcome is, which is probably the word I would have used there instead of consequences, are our responsibility. And so that goes to what Allison was saying about taking back our power, stepping into our power, and realizing if I'm an agent of change and I take this, I set out to accomplish a particular change, a particular outcome or objective. And my intention what initializes, what starts the ball rolling. If the outcome isn't what I want, it doesn't mean that my spell didn't work. It means I need to adjust my expectation, my intention, and my working. And so when you like kind of realize that there is no depression mode for your magic. You're a magical practitioner all the time, 24/7, and the purpose of this life is to figure it out along the way. And eventually, my experience has been you figure out how to do most of the stuff. Does that mean that there's nothing that I can't set my mind to magically that doesn't manifest? No, there's still some things I'm still working on. I'll probably be working on to the day that I die, and there's probably new stuff. And somewhere along the line, I might figure out some of the stuff that I haven't figured out in these first, almost 60 years. But the fact is that at no point in that process did I fail unless I simply didn't do the work. And so I wanted right off the bat to say that, because this is one of those quotes I think belongs in our, in our notes, in our grimoires, to really understand. So as we dive into the chapter, the purpose of banishment and banishment and binding are the two words that I often hear in metaphysical circles being conflated, being used as though they're synonyms sometimes, or just sometimes people will say, here's you need to do a binding spell on them, when what they actually mean is a banishment spell, or you need to do a banishment spell when what you actually need is a binding spell. And we're going to talk about binding in the next chapter. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about what binding is, but think of it in this way. If you're trying to prevent someone from taking an action, whether that action's a good action, a bad action, because magic is non-judgmental. So whether you want to stop somebody from doing something good or something quote unquote bad or something neutral, you want to prevent them, you want to interfere in their next steps, that's binding. And so what you're trying to do is energetically muck up the gears in their life. Now, I don't make a judgment, nor did a lot of our ancestors make a judgment on whether or not binding is good. Is always good. I'm of the opinion that our intentions are what makes a thing good or bad. And so if I'm attempting to interfere in somebody doing something good and healthy, and that's going to, advance their life or advance, the lives of their family and loved ones or the world, if I'm interfering and I'm binding them, then I have to really take a close look at my intentions. And here's why: it's not a moral judgment. If I'm going to interfere, so let's say Joe wants to go out and wants to start a daycare center for kids who have learning disabilities, and that's a beautiful thing. But I feel like I don't want Joe to do that. Maybe the reason that I don't want Joe to do that is that I'm worried that if Joe makes that kind of money, Joe will slip back into drug addiction or alcoholism or abusing their spouse or whatever. Maybe the reason I don't want it is jealousy. Maybe the reason I'm doing it is I don't feel comfortable with Joe being around kids. So it's not a moral judgment when I say whether or not we should bind, but it's a judgment of again, we talked about this in the 101 course, taking 100% responsibility. So if I'm responsible as an agent of change, and the only way I can affect the changes necessary for Joe to be fulfilled and for learning disabled kids to have a better daycare system for them, if the only way I could do that is by binding Joe, I'm probably not bringing my A game. I'm probably not looking at the problem as part of the solution. I'm just looking at the problem, and taking the easy way out. So that's sort of the idea in the difference between that. Now, banishment, by contrast to binding, and that's all we're going to talk about binding for tonight. And we'll talk about more of that on our next class. But banishment is actually putting the distance between you and someone else, or between someone else and someone else. So you're banishing their negative energy, their interference, their meddling, their lies, their magic, their whatever it is that they do that you want to see stop. That's what we use banishment for. And so that's why the sort of the remedies for banishing in the course are all pretty simple. They're household type things that we do, not very complex. About half of them in the book use rhyme. The other half don't, because as I said in the last class, it really depends on the mood that I'm in. Whether, because this is such a, not a petty, but almost mundane magic, I consider banishment, that in order to be able to focus the energy and the intention, it's so mundane that putting the rhyming spell in there makes me feel a little more zhuzhed up. Like it's like putting on your Sunday, best to go to a job interview. So if I'm going to bring my best intention to make this work, I'm going to put a little effort and creativity in it. And I tend to do that if the spells are simpler, because as you see on the screen, spellcraft is a reflection of our core beliefs. So if our core beliefs are essential unity, then the next question you say is, well, then why would you banish somebody if your belief is that we're all one? And the answer to that is that you're banishing them, not the person, but you banish behaviors. You banish you banish a thing rather than a person. Now, there are people out there who do physical banishments. And one of the best ways, one of the least intrusive ways to do that is, in the book, I talk about putting somebody under a rock. And so that just stops them from ever being able to interfere in your life, and it makes their efforts futile. So every year around this time of year, there's a convention of neo-pagans down in the southern part of the United States who have a big convention. And for whatever reason, the person who puts on that big show every year gets a bunch of their people that are doing presentations to go to my social media and a couple other authors' social media accounts and just bust our chops. They write hateful things. That's where this, the Italians saying that there's no such thing as a connection between Africa and Sicily. That's where these people are coming from. They're coming from this troublemaker little Uncle Fester troll in New Orleans who for whatever reason doesn't like me, doesn't like a couple other authors, and every year at this time they get triggered. We don't have any idea why. I haven't spoken to them in years. But see, if I put all of my energy into banishing them and sending them to Siberia, where they stand a better chance of people falling for their bullshit, I'm putting energy into that. That takes a lot out of me. Where I could pick up a rock and put their name on a piece of paper and put it under the rock with the names of the other people that are under a rock, and just say they can't bother me. So it doesn't mean that I'm not taking away any of their free agency. So they'll still, like this year, they still did their bullshit. They did their level best to screw with me on Instagram and TikTok. But every time they tried to attack me, a bunch of people stepped up and said, hey, wait a minute, my family are from that region. Some of them, part of them are from Africa, part of them are from Sicily. Have you ever picked up a history book? It's in there. So I didn't have to put all that energy into there. Other people with common sense said, hey, this is history. He's not making this stuff up, and it's not really, shouldn't be open for debate. And P.S., why does it matter to you? Like, if you have a magic that's working for you, do your magic. But you're clearly it's not. That's why you're spending your time on somebody else's channel trying to figure out what you can add to. So maybe next time when you look at somebody's channel, because we all should be doing that, I try to do that, look at it with an open mind And so that brings me to the next thing, and that is being clear about your spell. So before I talk about that, I wanted to just ask both of you that are with us live tonight, have you ever done a spell that, or any kind of magical working, that when the results were done, you couldn't really say that the spell didn't work, but it wasn't really what you were going for? Does that happen? Yeah.
I did. Me. It was actually trying to make my son see his now, thank God, ex-girlfriend for who she truly was. And I had this whole big thing that I was getting this candle, and I was getting, I took out a mold of a mask and I made this whole big mask out of wax. And then I tried to attempt to attach it to the candle that was her. And when it was melting, it looked so hideous. It looked like it was nothing. So the whole concept of the mask melting away and he was going to see her for who she truly was did not work at all. It didn't work at all. And I was like, oh, and I put a lot of effort into it, but the whole time I was doing it in the back of my head, like I kept saying, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. What happens if the mask don't fall off? And what happens if it falls off the wrong way? And it really just didn't work. So I just took the whole thing and went and buried it. And I was like, okay, it
So,
just wasn't what I expected.
or was it?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, your magic's a little more powerful than you thought, because you said it wasn't going to work, so it didn't.
it didn't. But then eventually I did something different and I made her go away.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example of how we do the things, because when we're doing certain things, if we have a feeling something's not going to work, it means something we're doing usually means something we're doing is not in alignment with our own values. And so maybe there was a part of you that said, I don't want to manipulate my son in this way. I want him to have this
Exactly.
realization. And so now I'm going to do a different spell to make, instead of focusing on her and her mask coming off, because she could always put a new mask on, I would say, like, if you focused on your son waking up and smelling the coffee, now you're done. You were
Right.
an agent for change, and good things happen.
Yeah. It's funny because I did something different. It was just the simplest thing in the universe. And that's what worked. The simple, not all the big fancy nonsense, because the simplest thing that I did worked.
Yeah.
That
I'm telling you,
goes to show you. Simple.
scissors and yarn, scissors and thread. Nothing
Mhm.
I do is ever more powerful at banishment than that. Ellen, how
Mhm.
about you? What was your experience?
All the bad stuff came up after. That was a good intention, actually, but not really a banishing either. It was more to draw back in what was lost. And everything just kind of blew up. Everything blew up. My relationships with people I wasn't trying to hurt, and yeah.
So that's another. I thank you for sharing that, because I recognize the vulnerability in sharing that. But that a lot of times can also be that our spell was about bringing the stuff that's lost, and stuff that's lost is gone. So you don't want the negative that might have been brewing in the background for people. You didn't want that back. You wanted to surround yourself with loving and supporting, and you wanted the feelings of you wanted the good feelings, you wanted the productive feelings back. And so that's one of the ways that we remember that we're always casting spells. And so if we call something lost, then that relationship can never come back until it's no longer lost. Because, you know, I tell people it's, you know, and they'll say, well, it's lost. And I say, no, it's not lost, but it will be in the last place that you look. And they laugh and they think I'm just making a joke. But if you think about it, that's where the solution lies. It's the last place you look. So the item was never, ever lost. It was always in that last place. The thing you're trying to get back is still there. It's just not that other crap that came into the picture.
Yeah.
So what I want to sort of wrap up the discussion, and I know these are, you know, slightly shorter chapters, but there's a lot of different options in there for things that you can do. And as we were talking before the class started, you know, it's really about finding the thing that resonates for you. And so if you know, sitting and centering and kind of having a candle, the orange, you know, making the orange candle with the banishing oil is a fantastic way to do that. That's definitely a spell that you sit at the table while it's happening. You don't walk away from, you know, from an orange on fire on your kitchen table. But you're, you know, if you're into rhyming, use the rhyming spells. You can take the spell from a different spell in that book, in that chapter, and you could substitute out words that don't rhyme, your own, or just take the words from one of the other spells I put in there that doesn't rhyme, or use one of the spells themselves that doesn't rhyme. But be more mindful of what you're creating. So when we banish something, the best results that I found that I get in banishing is when I do two things. One, I recognize that it's all about 100% responsibility for me. And so if it's about responsibility for me, it takes the edge off that blaming that I might be doing of the other person for whatever they're doing. Like you know, would notice that I said, I have no idea why Fester got their horns twisted and feels like once a year they get triggered. But I'm recognizing that they're getting triggered, that there's something either that I've done or said or that I am, or whatever, and these other authors, that's triggering. Now, it's not my responsibility. I don't have to change who I am, but I have to then say, do I want to interfere? Is this important enough for me? Now, if somebody's abusing, I don't want to say if they're abusing a child or a spouse, because then you would just contact the authorities. But if we pretend, for the sake of this argument, that there's no authorities there to be contacted, or that the authorities aren't going to pay attention, maybe your next door neighbor was a person that was on that broke into the Capitol on January 6th, and so you have to either look at, am I going to do a binding spell so that they can no longer harm other people, you know, threaten the life of people that they don't like, or harm themselves? And that's a binding spell. Or do you want to do a banishing spell where you say, let's just keep this person out of harm's way. Let's keep them, like if I bound somebody that's a conspiracy theorist, in my personal family, I've bound them so that they don't go to the websites that are poisoning their mind, so that they don't consume media that triggers whatever, you know, mishigas in their heads. And so when you're binding, you're still healing the other person. You're healing the situation, and you may be, rather than seeing it as interfering, you're just putting just enough obstacles, like we do with an infant when we put up a baby with gate. I wanted to say cage, whatever they call them, gates, little foldable gates, so the baby can't run in the kitchen and touch the stove. You're just creating an obstacle that over time they'll outgrow, and that would be where I end this chapter, is encouraging you, if you're going to do a banishing spell. And again, no judgment. If you want to do a banishing spell, just to banish somebody from your life and you never see them again, as long as you're absolutely sure that that's what you want, and you understand why that's what you want, that's the big thing. You know, why am I banishing someone? Am I doing it to stop them from harming themselves? Am I doing it because they annoy me? Am I doing it because they don't like me, or they're dangerous, or they're like, there's a million different reasons. You have to get clear on the why. And then that once you know the why, the how becomes easier. So the how then becomes, am I trying to heal this person? Am I trying to just give myself some mental health space from this person, or a break from them, or disengage from toxic behavior? So your banishing spell will work no matter what it is that your intention is, but you got to make sure you know what the intention is. Because if the intention is, if you're telling yourself this isn't going to work, that's the outcome of your spell. Anything else that you did prior to that it doesn't matter, because the intention you set as an agent of change is, I just wasted my time, this isn't going to work. Or worse, like people who go to the other side and say, oh, this is going to cause blah 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 blah. That's, you know, like this is going to make it worse, so this is going to make them, they're going to find out, and then they're going to attack me. And you just have to put all that out of your head. So sometimes the best spell you can do before doing the spell that affects the change that's more important is to do the spell on you, to do a spell that you become clear, to do a spell that you become fearless, to do a spell that you become tuned in to your intuition and the intuition of the ancestors. And when you do that, it starts to, your spell work will then begin to look like just regular everyday spiritual practice. Because I know I need to work on me every single day to pay more attention, to not get, I just went ballistic on a family member, on a loved one, who attacked another loved one unfairly. And I did everything but tell them that they were a worthless piece of shit, blah, 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 blah. And then I had to walk out of the room, and right as Philadelphia lost. So it was a good thing. I needed to get out of the room anyway. But when that was going on, I recognized that I'm always doing spells. And if I were listening to the ancestors, including that person's ancestors, I would have been more patient. I would have just corrected them and said, do not attack this person. They're not the problem. The other person, so-and-so, is the problem. Get all your facts straight, or don't be disrespectful in my home. And then there's, you know, once I've set those boundaries, now boundaries are another form of spell. I should have put that in the book. That's actually pretty, that's worth your notes. Boundaries are another type of spell, and they fit in the next chapter in binding. That's what binding is. It's actually setting boundaries around a person or a situation, a thing, so that you affect that outcome in the direction you want it to go. So when you're doing this, if your intention, if your daily intention is to be more connected to your ancestors, more connected to the earth, more connected to nature and to the cycle of the seasons and the elements, then you don't ever have to go out of your way to be mean, because the universe is just the quote that the arc of the moral universe bends toward justice is absolutely true in my experience. And so as long as I just do the things I need to do to get things, give space or a container for something to get course corrected, then I've done the best spell that needs to be done. And those are the more effective spells. The spell where, you know, somebody that's under a rock on my shelf for several years, and then I see them pop up. There are people that are under a rock who, you know, did kind of serious harm to my reputation, because they were worried about, if they associate with the heretic, they're going to lose little, you know, sales in their tchotchke shop or whatever. And then they left the platform and they stopped talking to me. But I still love those people dearly. And so they're just under a rock, because I don't want to bind them. I don't want to, I don't even want to necessarily banish them from my life. I just want, I've banished their toxicity. I've banished their behaviors. And that way I could still see the person. I'd have to block them on Facebook. I could still see them, make sure they're okay. make sure they're doing well, and then I can still do the other things I do for all of our community, which is including them, even though they left, in my intentions for prosperity and abundance and healing and happiness and finding your own power. And because I know that when they really do find their power, they won't give a rat's ass if Susie stops buying glittery candles from them, because they'll know that Susie isn't the source of that income. The universe is. They are. And so Susie could go away, the money will come back in. You know, people told me 2 years into this course, when the first group of people left because they didn't like having an expanded focus that included African traditional religions and horoscopes and astrology and all that. They didn't like all of those. They wanted just to be purely Italian. They didn't like us letting non-Italians in, all this other nonsense. People said, you'll be done by the end of your second year. Nobody's going to stick around. Here we are in our fourth year. I thought it was our third year. Here we're in our fourth year, because when you recognize you're the source of the abundance flowing through you, the universe figures it out. They put all the pieces together, and it works out. So before I take questions, Ellen, that you said you had some questions at the end. The on the screen is your homework for next week, or for 2 weeks from now. Chapter 6, Binding Spells. It's 6 pages, and then we'll talk about that in the course of that discussion. We'll do the same type of thing we did tonight. But Ellen, tell me what were some of the questions that you had at the end of the chapter?
Just about a better experience, and we need to input better beliefs, expectations, and data. It's the beliefs and data are, I get that, but because I'm doing the work to get rid of data so that I can bring in the good data. And it's about the expectations, because I recall, when we first learned how to do the spell work, we are to leave our expectations out of it. So what do you mean by what are we supposed to expect?
That's a great question. So the difference is between being married to the process and divorced from the outcome. That means that you're trusting the process. So your expectation then has to shift from being this specific result oriented to the overall, to you got to dig deeper. So like you might think that the solution, and when I do readings for people, or I do custom spell work for people, a lot of times they'll come to me and say, I want to, I need $2,000. We got to do a spell to get me $2,000. What can you do? Can you help me? And I say, do you really need the $2,000? Yes, I really need the $2,000. Have you done things in the past that didn't work? Yes, I did things in the past that didn't work. I really need $2,000. And then I'll say, what do you really need? And they'll initially argue that they really need $2,000. And I tell them, if I can do a spell, a couple questions: can you be divorced from the outcome of that spell? Can you just trust in the process? And they'll eventually say, yes, I can trust in the process. And I'll explain why. Because if we understand that we're essential unity, we understand we're one with the universe, then there's nothing separating you except your beliefs from the abundance that's already yours. So we're not creating what's not yours. That $2,000 is already yours. It always was. But it isn't the $2,000 that you need. It may be that you only need, like, and then they say, well, it's because I have to pay my car payment, and I can't do that because if I don't have my car payment, then I can't do readings at the local bar on Saturday, and that's when they have their big fall festival and blah blah blah. So then I just say, so what you really need is to be at the local fall festival at that bar on Saturday, because that's where your income's coming. Yes, that makes sense. Okay, well then let's manifest that. Let's get you to the bar, and let's affirm while we're at it that money flows to you, through you, and all around you, because money is just an expression of source. And then the light bulb goes off in their head, and they're like, oh, So it wasn't that I can't have any expectations. It's that my expectations have to be in alignment with my beliefs, my core beliefs. Otherwise, there's internal conflict, and I just sabotage my magic. Because your beliefs will always win. So when you try to do something that's against your core values or against your core beliefs, then your expectation is that there's a way to cheat the universe. And you don't have to cheat the universe. So I tell people that one of the biggest cons that ever happened in the world of religion, and there are billions of them, but one of the biggest ones that just really is a pet peeve for me is the notion of sin. Because theologically, whether you're from any of the Abrahamic traditions, any religious traditions, sin is when you're doing something that doesn't acknowledge your connection to source. So stealing isn't a sin because you stole. Stealing is a sin because, and sin is just a word we made up to apply to it. Stealing is sin because it forgets that you are an expression of source, and so is money. And so is whatever the thing is that you feel you got to steal. So if I'm connected to source, why do I got to steal something to get it? You just have to manifest it. I don't have to steal it. I have to either manifest the thing or manifest the resources to get it or manifest an idea that can be traded for it. And so that's kind of how our magic has to be. Focus on what it is that you actually want. Ask yourself, is this in alignment with my core values? Like, for example, full disclosure, my biggest challenge magically in the past was always being able to manifest abundance. When I had the 6 salons and I was making $26,000 a month, all of that money went into a foundation, so I didn't ever have to touch it. The bills got paid. And all the charity work got done, and the AIDS clinic kept running, and I lived a comfortable life. But my comfortable life wasn't much different than what I have now in a 2-bedroom apartment. It was just happened to be in a 5-bedroom home. But I still only slept in one bed. I still sat at one table. And I had to come to terms about 1.5 years ago with the idea that the reason my prosperity stuff kept failing was because the notion of getting wealthy personally is not in alignment with my core values, because my core values are socialist. My core values are, if I have $100, 50 of it's yours. So I had to say, okay, so I want money, I want abundance, I want prosperity, I want a home, but I want it for these reasons. And I had to be really specific, and it meant a lot more spell work. It meant a lot more digging. It meant a lot more uncomfortableness, because when we ask what our core values are, the shit comes to the surface. The relationships that are not healed come to the surface. Anything that's going to get in your way. You asked about the asking for something, doing a spell for something, and then all the negative came. All of that stuff has to get out of the way for you to manifest what you really want. So the good news is our minds really know what it is that we really want. They're very clear. Your mind is really clear about it. It's just you got to get your head clear so that you recognize it. So hopefully that's a good takeaway for you, because does that make it clear, like the difference between expectations and being attached to the outcome? I kind of got on a tangent there. I apologize. Was there another question? Was there another question, Ellen?
No, I think that was all that really stood out to me.
I think that's a good place for us to wrap up on. And again, next week, let's see if I can pull that slide up. Next week, 2 weeks from now, pages 115 to 121, we'll talk about binding spells, and we'll really kind of build on this conversation that we had tonight. And for those of you that are watching on the replay, please join in the conversation. Don't feel like you have to keep your comments short. I think the comments can be as long as you want, But if not, do multiple comments because we want your participation as well. And if there's questions that you have, put them under there. This will probably take me a couple hours to get it posted up on the net, or maybe about an hour. It's 9:46, so that's a little shy of where we usually are. So anyway, thank you both for being here live. It always makes it so much easier to do these. For those who asked, our open topic nights will usually be recorded as well. We just decided the last time that when it's only one person one-on-one, I'm going to do open topic with them, but it's more of like a gift to that person. We're just going to chat. So it's because then that way we could have a more a more private conversation about the things they want to know. So I figure if nobody else showed up for one of those open topic nights, the person who's there now has an opportunity to ask me about stuff they don't want anyone else to know. And so that's why you can't find a recording from our last one, because there was only one other person besides me there, and we had a wonderful conversation, I hope. And we did good.
Yes, we did. We did.
Good. And that's it. I appreciate and love you guys. Our next guest on the brew is going to be not on a Sunday night. It's going to be actually on the 21st, which is a Tuesday. My birthday is Thursday, so the following Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, the 21st. We're going to do the show at 8 o'clock at 8:30 Eastern time. Just because Dominic is going to be our guest, and we're going to be talking about ATRs and the diasporic traditions, and they have to work. Their work schedule on Sunday wasn't working with this, so we're bumping the show up a week, and then we'll rebroadcast it on that Sunday as well. But we would love to have as many of you as can make it to those broadcasts. Tune in as well. And when you do that, tune in by going to the YouTube channel itself, to youtube.com or YouTube on your phone, so that when you ask a question, it'll show your name. Because for some reason, Facebook doesn't always work. Like Facebook has an extra step, but they don't tell you what it is. I guess we're supposed to guess. And they keep saying, well, there's the extra step. And I was like, well, can you tell me what it is? I'll be happy to share it. But there is an extra step. We just don't know what the hell it is that gets your name to show up. So we know who we're talking to. But just go to the YouTube channel itself. I think my days of using Facebook are winding considerably down. It'll only be a place where I duplicate content from other places, just so folks have a way of still connecting to the show and so forth. And I can still, give my little sister and little brother a hard time. But that's pretty much all. And then flirt shamelessly with boys. That's the only thing Facebook's good for me. So I love and appreciate you guys. I'll get this up on the site. Have a good night.
Night.
Right.